everyone is safe during this pandemic. Welcome to the international webinar of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College in association with United Kingdom's Environmental Law Association, Birmingham, United Kingdom, and University of Johannesburg, South Africa, an international webinar on the role of legislation in environmental protection. At the outset, I am happy to inform you all that our Evening Degree College is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. I now request Mr. Sunil Kumar sir to play a small video of our college.
Begins with a small step, proving this statement true. It all began in 1930 when two women, educational enthusiasts, took up a noble initiative. In the erstwhile posh locality of Seshadripuram, Srimati Anandamma and Srimati Seethamma started a primary school with 20 children. Now, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, under its umbrella, has 36 institutions. It all began with the educational visionary Sri K.M. Nanjappa, the then president of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, in 1971, which has been a landmark in the history of education for the working students by starting Seshadripuram Evening College.
Our college started with the primary objective of imparting formal education to the quality and needy. The college is affiliated to the Bengaluru Central University. Being in the heart of the city, it has an easy reach and connectivity. Its premises comprise of spacious building with good canteen, computerized library, business lab, browsing center, Wi-Fi facility, sports club, thus well equipped for all academic, sports, co-curricular like NSS, NCC, YRC, etc. and extracurricular activities throughout the year. The college organizes orientation program for freshers and guest lecturers to equip them.
As most of us are working in the morning and studying in an evening degree college, it is very facilitative for us to excel in our jobs. Even though we are studying in an evening degree college, we are being provided many state level and national level opportunities to express our talents. Also, many cultural activities are being conducted.
SEDC is engaged in various cultural activities throughout the year. There are numerous committees in the college that perform variedly on their behalf and have a lasting effect on the college, students, as well as outsiders.
Our evening degree college believes in the vision to ignite the minds of every student to identify and develop their inner strength, with the mission to promote holistic development of students by offering quality education and making them self-reliant and progressive.
Our college NCC cadets will visit every academic year in Officers Training Academy Chennai and INS Kadamba Naval Base at Karwar. It will motivate our college NCC cadets to join Indian Armed Force.
Thank you, Sunil Kumar sir. Now I request our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish sir, to welcome and introduce all the dignitaries to this international webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vanessa. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Happy noon to India and happy morning to United Kingdom and South Africa. I take this opportunity to welcome you all for this international webinar in association with United Kingdom Environmental Law Association, Birmingham, United Kingdom, and University of Johannesburg, South Africa. At the outset, I would like to introduce and welcome Dr. Udupi Krishna, President Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi and Honorary General Secretary Seshadripuram Education Trust, who is inaugurating today's webinar. Sir is a transformation leader with a rare blend of technologist, educationist, social activist, and humanist. Sir is a recipient of Eminent Engineer Award and prestigious fellowships of Institution of Engineering and Technology UK and World Academy of Productivity Science Canada. In recognition of his dedicated service to the nation, Dr. Krishna has been conferred with President's Gold Medal, the highest national award given for Red Cross humanitarian work of high order by the President of India. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Uni Degree College, I welcome you for this webinar. I would like to welcome the Vice Chancellor and other office bearers of the University of Johannesburg, and specially I welcome Christy Sibnerger, Chair UKELA, and Alison Boyd, Operations Director UKELA. Further, I would like to introduce and welcome today's keynote speaker, Dr. A.N. Yellappa, renowned environmentalist of India. Sir, during his tenure as Conservator of Forests and later as a Secretary Government of Karnataka Department of Ecology, Environment and Forest, worked extensively for restoration and protection of lakes and rivers of the state. He also initiated an action plan for preventing pollution of lakes and riverine ecosystems. Actively associated with the Wetlands Survey and Waterfowl Census of the state from 1987 to 1996 and was instrumental in identifying the causes for pollution of lakes and rivers and initiated suitable action for the restoration of freshwater ecosystem of the state. At present, he is the Governing Council member of Foundation for Ecological Security of India and Karnataka High Court Lok Adalat, Chief Advisor to Bangalore City Biodiversity Park and Agastya International, Kuppam, Chairman of Bangalore Corporation Biodiversity Board, Faculty in National Law School of India, University and IIM Bangalore. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Education Trust, I wholeheartedly welcome you for this webinar. ಇಂದಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಆತ್ಮೀಯವಾಗಿ ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸುತ್ತೇನೆ ಸರ್. I am happy to introduce today's one of the theme speaker, Jill Crawford, co-convener of United Kingdom Environmental Law Association, Environmental Litigation Working Party, Associate Solicitor at BLM in Birmingham, UK. Crawford is an experienced environmental law practitioner, having worked for number of years at the Environment Agency, prosecuting serious and complex environmental crime matters, and also as an advisory solicitor in respect of contaminated land and producer responsibility obligations. Jill currently works within the environment team at BLM, where her works involves advising on environmental agency investigations, interpretations of environmental legislation, and defining organizations for alleged breaches of environmental legislation. She also advises business of its environmental obligations and environmental risk. Jill advises even on protected species, including flora and fauna, habitat protection, and environmental access justice. She is the chair of West Midlands UKELA and a member of UKELA's Brexit task force. She has assisted with UKELA's response to the government's consultation on environmental judicial review and access to the justice and the government's proposed new environmental body post-Brexit. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Education Trust, I wholeheartedly welcome you for this webinar, madam. I would like to introduce and welcome one more eminent team speaker, Sikulel Nkobo, Faculty of Law, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Sikulel is lecturer within the Law Faculty at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. She graduated with an LLB and LLM from the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa. Prior to joining the University of Johannesburg, she worked as a research and teaching associate at the University of Witwatersrand. She currently teaches labor law and also served as guest lecturer for the Public International Law LLM module. As a guest lecturer, she taught specific aspects of environmental law. Her research initiates include energy law and regulations, environmental law and policy of well as sustainable development law. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Education Trust, I welcome you for this webinar. Namaste. Akbar, welcome you, Mesro. I hope I pronounced properly, madam. I am immensely proud to introduce and welcome Sri Krishna Swami K. Sir, trustee of Seshadripuram Education Trust. Sir is a reputed law professional before the High Court of Karnataka. He serves in various well-known social institutions as social activist. He is the governing council chairman of Seshadripuram Law College. Sir always supports for all the events of our evening degree college. Sir, I welcome you for this webinar and I request you to preside over this international webinar. I welcome all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Education Trust and all the principals of our sister institutions, other heads of the institution, conveners, volunteers, and all the participants who have registered across the globe. Now, I welcome Tarappa Kunnur, Program Coordinator, and Sunil Kumar J, IQSC Coordinator. And finally, I welcome our own teaching and administrative faculties for this webinar. Thank you, one and all. Vinay sir, over to you.
Thank you, sir, for welcoming all. On behalf of all, I welcome our beloved principal, sir, to this international webinar.
Thank you, sir.
The man behind who has brought the global recognition to Seshadripuram Educational Trust, who is none other than Dr. Udeyappe Krishna sir, Karnataka President, Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi. I now request our Honorary General Secretary, Dr. Udeyappe Krishna sir, to render inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Sir, unmute yourself, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hope I am audible now. Good afternoon, dear participants. Advocate High Court of Karnataka and trustee of our institutions, Sri K. Krishna Swami, keynote speaker of the webinar and well-known environmentalist, Dr. A.N. Yellappa Reddy ji. We have two distinguished theme speakers, Jill Crawford from the UK and Shikule Nakobo from Johannesburg. The principal of the Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, Professor N.S. Satish, Professor Tarappa Kunnur, Professor Sunil Kumar, all the distinguished participants from across the globe, and my very dear friends. I must at the outset congratulate Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. They have been conducting a series of webinars to mark the Golden Jubilee celebrations of the college. 50 years of service in the cause of education of the poor and the needy. I congratulate all the stakeholders. I bring to them the greetings of our president and our trustees on this occasion. Friends, I am happy that the college is collaborating with United Kingdom Environmental Law Association, Birmingham, the University of Johannesburg, South Africa as well. Both these well-known internationally renowned organizations have come together in supporting us in organizing this international webinar on a topic of great significance. The topic is titled as the role of legislation in environmental protection. I would like to share some of my thoughts on this. See, law is a double-edged sword. It can be used to protect, and at the same time, it can be used to permit destruction. And today, environmental law, in the name of protection of environment, we see there has been a lot of forces gathering to what I call facilitating businesses in the name of environmental laws. So the question that comes before us is whether these environmental impact assessments, what we call EIA, which is being spoken of in the media, can these become tools for ease of doing business instead of protecting nature? This is the concern that all of us have. So my only thing is, are environmental protection laws there to enforce the polluter pay principle or promote pay and pollute governance? This is the most important thing that we have to think. Most of the time it happens pay and pollute. And this is something that we should all be conscious about, aware of, and then we must always try to raise our concerns before the authorities whenever we get an opportunity. Friends, today what is happening is we have laws, enough laws. The pollution control boards are there, pollution control laws are there. They only try to regulate industry instead of, promoting the larger good of the public. Like, they have to ensure clean air, clean water, but that is not happening. On the other hand, they have also become, more and more regulatory bodies, more and more tilted towards regulating industry. It's not regulating industries alone won't help, but then these laws have to be proactive in protecting the environment. So most of these laws, whatever a law is, it should have a philosophy behind it. And if you do not have a philosophy and that law, in the normal parlance, we call it as the jurisprudence. So in the Indian context, we have the Constitution of India serving as the jurisprudence for the environmental law. We have under the Part 4 of the Constitution, Part 4A of the Constitution, the Directive Principles of State Policy, where under Article 48A, protection and improvement of the environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife is dealt with elaborately. Not only that, under Part 4A again, dealing with the fundamental duties of every citizen of India, there is also mandated that every citizen shall protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. Friends, most of the laws that are framed do not seem to be in consonance with the spirit of the Constitution. Most of the times, our lawmakers forget the idea that ours is a rule of law and constitution guided society. And therefore, whatever laws that are framed should adhere to, particularly the environmental laws, should adhere to what I call the directive principles of state policy, as also in consonance with the fundamental duties of every citizen of India. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, always used to say, if love fails, law prevails. So more than the importance of law, we need to establish the rule of love. Rule of law is always there, that is there. But then if you are able to establish the rule of love, make people voluntarily conscious of the environment, that itself would be a great service. And that would do greater things than any law or any kind of enforcement. Friends, Mahatma Gandhi was a committed and dedicated environmentalist. Among all the freedom fighters that we saw in India of those times, he was the one who cautioned people to tread carefully on issues related to economic development, keeping in mind the cost to people and the natural environment. See, today our young people talk of cost to the companies. We talk in commercial terms. It was Mahatma Gandhi who then spoke of the cost to people and the cost to natural environment. And even when he was engrossed in the overwhelming struggle for freedom, he did not lose his focus on protection of nature and its resources. Gandhiji's basic tenets were very simple. He said we should not be greedy in using the earth's precious natural resources. He always said the collective views and decisions of a large group of people are preferable to those of a small clique of leaders and bureaucrats. This is the crux of the whole environmental protection decisions, and therefore we have to pay a lot of attention to this. And a more environmental friendly approach to development should prevail over unsustainable approaches that lack foresight. He used to say, develop without hurting nature and culture. That was the clarion call that he gave to the powers that be during his struggle for freedom. And he said that it is our moral duty to share with and care for the poor in the society. We must be happy with simple and comfortable lifestyles. See, it is all the greediness that ultimately results in environmental destruction. And all development, he said, as far as possible, must lead to local self-reliance with equal opportunities for all sections in the society. And he said we must give importance to a disciplined manner of using natural resources. He was a great opposer of truth and non-violence. He said we must practice non-violence not only towards other living organisms, but also towards Earth's resources. Overuse of these materials is also a form of violence. This is the greatest philosophy that Mahatma Gandhi gave to us. And the most important thing that Gandhi told us was that we should act in a manner that is part of nature, not apart from nature. So the more we move away from nature, we have all the problems concerning environment. And therefore, my dear friends, let us try to lead a simple life. Let us try to understand that being greedy, being indulgent, we are hurting nature. And if this consciousness is driven into the minds of all the people across all sections of the population everywhere, I think that is the greatest environmental protection, in addition to the laws that be. And as I already told you, for any law to be effective, it should have a strong jurisprudence. And that jurisprudence, fortunately for us in India, is drawn from the spirit of the Constitution itself. And I'm sure we have very eminent speakers from the UK and then South Africa, and from our own country, Dr. N. Yellappa, who has done immense work. He has dedicated his whole life for the conservation of environment, and he would share some of his experiences, I think, beyond the ambit of law, because he has spent his whole life in the protection of environment, and I'm sure he would be sharing a lot of thoughts on this wonderful occasion. And definitely, I'm sure this webinar is going to be an enriching experience for all the participants. I wish you all Godspeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the inaugural address. May I now request Dr. Yellappa Reddy, sir, renowned environmentalist, India, to enlighten us with this keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Yellappa Reddy, sir.
Namaste. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Krishnaji, you have not left anything for me. More or less, in the inaugural address, he has given a keynote address. So I must really admire you for your in-depth inaugural address, covering every aspect which I am supposed to cover. But now you made my job extremely simple and easy. However, thank you for giving this opportunity. And now I will request the principal to display the PowerPoint presentation.
Sure,
I will
sir.
go through that.
Sir.
Yeah, please.
Sure, sir. Rajat, sir.
Yes, next. Next, please. As I told the Mr. Krishna, my very good friend, has covered most of the areas which I am supposed to cover. But I would like to touch upon certain things. Number one, common justice and humanity is missing in the economic growth module at global level. With the result, world is facing climate change, floods, loss of biodiversity, loss of rich habitats, extinction of species, etc. Mostly on human-induced, resulted in acute scarcity of the water, hunger, pandemic due to lack of public health concern, resulted in impoverishment in all respects. I think all the participants will agree. Today, the whole of India is suffering from more than 60% of India and also China and in many other countries. The floods are causing very, very destructive menace to take away the fertile soil. What is required for food security? What is required for water security? It is our vegetation and also the thick mantle of the greenery. Once, because of the deforestation and reckless mining, now the topsoil is washing away. With the result, the community and the farmers, especially the peasants and peasantry, is becoming a big problem or at the global level. After March 2020 has become a real threat to human beings by a tiny virus called COVID-19. So man is incapable of understanding the havoc played by a very, very small, tiny virus. But yet, man is very arrogant and is trying to find out to control and to dictate terms to the nature, Mother Earth. So our political leaders have failed to find new ways of thinking in spite of the COVID, except glorifying non-issues in the midst of deep global crisis of COVID-19. The non-issues are very important. Political issues are more important. Domination is very important. Occupying others' territory is very important. Then spending more than 60% of the money for equipping ourselves with weapons and nuclear weapons and all kinds of things are more important. So these are non-issues, but most of the leaders are devoting more time on non-issues. The next point is economists right from the industrial era. Right from the industrial era are concentrating only on developing, on promoting the material comforts and prosperity and all kinds of things. The driving force is material comforts and the materials to promote production, mass production. As Mr. Krishna stated, Mahatma Gandhi is not production by mass production is important. Masses production is important. Every man should produce something for to eke out his living. So the corporate bodies have taken away to produce mass production. With the result, masses have lost their livelihood. So the present policies of all government in power is keen in promoting and empowering industry by diluting EIA laws and disregarding the global summits where they have put their signatures. As Mr. Krishna in his inaugural address rightly pointed out, the organizations who are supposed to control and regulate are trying to protect them. With the result, the pollution levels at not only in India and also at the global level is increasing, and the disease burden and health is being threatened. So our government during COVID lockdown has passed several ordinances to promote more development or unthinkable strategies and policies. Similarly, USA and China and other countries seem to be keen on fixation of predatory money spinners at the cost of the environmental and ecological disasters by plucking vitals of the mother nature, which mother nature is virtually um, the red blood water flows, and also the topsoil, the flesh of the topsoil is galloping and filling man-made dams and oceans. With the result, today the floods are accelerating and devastating the vast agricultural lands and crops. The common man is suffering, and that's it. With this brief, I will devote 5 to 6 minutes to speak about invisible laws. Next, please. Invisible laws. That is the part 2 portion of my presentation. The web of life and the secret of creative vacuum. What is web of life? So starting from mosses to the lichens to the microbiology up to the elephant and to the whales, it is interconnected. That is the web of life. And the secret of creative vacuum. We have to understand what is the creative vacuum, which there is no law to understand, or it is impossible to frame a law. But John Davidson's book contains a wonderful understanding of the human beings and the universe. What is the role of a last species, evolved species, man? He claims himself as a crown of evolution, and but still he is responsible for all the problems at global level. We inhabited the Mother Earth by weaving together the modern scientific knowledge with the deepest of the mystical insight. The deepest of the mystical insight is that is invisible vacuum, which is controlling, regulating more than the physical things. So the web of life brings together the breathable air, what we call in our Sanskrit words, pranavayu. The breathable air, it is not visible. But today what is happening to the breathable air? The pollutants, the microorganisms, the viruses invaded the breathable air. So the pranavayu and the elixir of life, what we call it, Jiva Jala, and we worship Mother Earth and other life forms created by on her home, Mother Earth home. It is not our creation. Whatever nature has struggled billions of years, starting from chlorophyll up to this level, is created by itself. But still, man thinks that he can dictate, and it is meant to serve him. And he thinks that he can dictate terms. So our ancestors, our sages and saints, had a fairly good understanding of the hologram and the endocrine functions of all creations, not only human beings, but all creations, including plants, animals, and the secret of creative vacuum. We may be thinking that we are doing that, but without the creative vacuum, without oxygen, without various other elements which are not visible, that is the creative vacuum, nothing can flourish. So our ancestors had a fairly good knowledge of the understanding of the electromagnetic and gravitational fields from a revolutionary point of view. And now somebody is interfering there. Please try to avoid that. Yes, thank you. So our evolutionary points of view, and they profoundly recorded in Vedic literature. The electromagnetic and gravitational fields, from the evolutionary point of view, our ancestors have done enough research, and in the Vedic literature, especially the Rig Veda, out of more than 50 to 60% of the Rig Veda speaks about only environment and how to take care of the Mother Earth, how to take care of the most important invisible things. So our ancestors had a fairly good knowledge, and they were able to bring out in the form of a of the Vedic literature. So they also recorded the mandate of the hello. Please try to avoid this. Please try to avoid this putting at the center. Hello. So they are also recorded and the limitations by way of generating inexpensive pollution-free strategies by establishing sacred landscapes like Panchavatis, Panchavalkalas, and Ayurvedic and ritual gardens, and the spiritual gardens, especially Aurobindo Ghosh and Mother of the Pondicherry have given a spiritual definitions for more than 800 plants, but they will have some sort of a what do you call a signature of the creator. So decentralized sources of electrical and chemical energies, what we call a Panchabhutas and Panchabhutas, the centers of the seed from which all life transactions spread all around, where the forces of transactions, integration, and harmony and that lie dormant in vacuum will emanate from all sides and fill the womb of the Mother Earth. And with the help of well-evolved ecosystems where the world in which we live, it has been created. The projection, creation, emanation invisibly operates in vacuum. Please, next. It operates invisibly. So the modern ecologist also listed the region-specific keystone flora and fauna of the terrestrial, riverine, and marine ecosystems and their interrelationships and interdependence, and right from microorganism to elephant to the whale, what ecologists call endemic species. How many endemic species which are local, specific, site-specific, climate-specific, evolved by itself, and which man recklessly, mindlessly destroyed. So today, the endemic species in most of the ecologically sensitive area are completely devastated. So our ancestors had some sort of a customary law, what they call it, Sthala Vruksha. That means each locality has got its own ecosystem. Kula Vruksha. That means each human race have a responsibility to protect its that particular species. So all those customary laws have been we're not practicing, and many of the people do not know about it. So the integrated systems are fully equipped for self-regeneration, self-repair, and self-vitalization, and knew fully well the language of mutualism and commensalism, as well as the language of caring and sharing in endemic biosystems. The electromagnetic fields, which mentioned earlier, is a phenomenon in terms of electrons, the light, and in terms of photons, and the human mind and its characteristics in terms of RNA and DNA is known to scientists who are exploring. Please avoid this. Hello, hello. Who are exploring? Now you are. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Please avoid this display of.
Sure, sir.
Yes, please try to avoid or put it on the last. So,
Sure, sir.
the human mind and its characteristics in terms of RNA and DNA. See, again, you are doing it. Hello. In terms of electrons and protons and the human mind and its characteristics in terms of RNA and DNA is known to the scientists who are exploring human genome and its diversity. It is very well known. It is a highly developed and evolved science today. In view of the world view also, it is invisible and seen as a primary and visible being uh, delegated the category of an epiphenomenon. That is called epiphenomenon. So this matter may seem real and very much accountable by the invisible world. The electromagnetic fields, which in turn are caused by something subtler and subtlest, and the human mind in the matrix of all matter, and the holistic composition, which totally depend on invisible pranavayu, an elixir of life, apart from other elements. Next. Next, please. So the invisible is primary according to our Vedic scholars, and the visible are epiphenomenon, which lies in our lack of access to the invisible. So we are not at all concerned about that. With the result today, the climate change from 1900 to today, the parts per billion has increased from 250 or 220 to 490 parts per million in the carbon content in the ambient air. With the result, the invisible, the climate change, invisible, the invisible, what do you call, the Montreal Protocol were able to find out the ozone hole in the stratosphere. So, but the absolute truth is it lies outside the spectrum of frequencies accessible to senses of perceptions of all life and life forms, including human beings, that is touch, color, fragrance, sight, and nose, and faculties of all indriyas play a very important role. But that aspect of understanding and correcting to the Panchabhutas and maintaining harmony within themselves is really creating and problem to the whole world. But human desires, comforts, as Mr. Krishna stated in his inaugural address, needs and greeds in the new world view, according to Carl Rogers, the famous psychologist, has confronted this question, but he provided bold and perhaps the only answer on our command to redress our basic needs. So Carl Rogers has pointed out that human beings possess the latent potential to have access to the invisible, where our pancha indriyas and perceptions, which come to which come automatically by birth. We are equipped by birth. Therefore, our organs can sense the invisible. So this latent faculty of empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, as Mahatma Gandhi said, Mr. Krishna has very emphatically, very clearly mentioned about our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, how he informed the whole world. And also he started his life in Johannesburg with empathy and sympathy when plague is, there is an outbreak. So one of our the scientist is participating. I'm very happy when Mahatma Gandhi has taken up this issue of humanity in Johannesburg. So the Carl Rogers say it is not an easy task in the atmosphere prevailing in this world. Our ancestors emphasized the same principles emphatically in our Vedic literature. We need to understand there can be no real study of the human mind unless the scientists who wish to study and willing to show courage and perseverance, like Greta Thunberg. That young girl, a 13, 14-year-old girl, started questioning the global leaders boldly and courageously, with great courage. And she's questioning, how dare you to wound my mother earth? How many of the seniors or intellectuals of our generation were able to question the decision makers? So the children have taken up this issue. So the two speakers of today's webinar who bring out the facts of contaminated land. I'm extremely happy that one of the speakers is talking about the contaminated land, where we are dumping all kinds of toxic substances and water, the air, and the complex matters. So that I think very eminent speaker is speaking about it, and I can read in the brief given to me and her concern and how she challenged various other in her country. And also other speaker is very about policies and sustainable development is also speaking. So I will just finish it within another 2-3 minutes in my part 3. Go to the part 3, please. So the sharing my own experience as a member of the Karnataka Eco Club. I had a very unique opportunity to serve with sitting judges as a as a expert member of the Lok Adalat. I and one of the sitting judges used to conduct public meetings of all these concerned district authorities and district people and the pollution control board, forest department, agriculture department, health department, various departments. So we used to question them. How are you, were you able to understand the environment laws? Very politely, in a very dignified language, Mr. Krishna, in the inaugural address, Mr. Krishna, as Dr. Krishna has very clearly brought out in a very polite, dignified way how the pollution control board is not performing their duties and enforcing the laws. There is a plethora of laws are there, and why they are not enforcing. And it is a topic which I do not want to dwell more. So what we used to do in the public hearing, in all the district offices, we used to highlight about the environmental issues and question how the interdepartmental connections are lacking and how the public is suffering, how the water is polluted, how the sewage water has been discharged, and how the air quality is deteriorating. Some of these issues, which has really made things to understand by the local authorities about their responsibilities, starting from a power karmika. A power karmika means the person who keeps the hygiene uh, of the city or a town and at the village. The Panchayat Development Officer, PDO of a village, and the CEO of a district. And they have got a very big responsibility of maintaining the public health. So we used to draw their attention on various things. Next, please. So my experience there, I will quote 2 examples. So when the government hospitals not realized the importance of treating the liquid waste and the solid waste and the human waste which they are generating. So we have questioned the hospital authorities, both private and the government hospital authorities. How are you disposing? There is a biomedical rules and regulations. So when they have expressed their own certain constraints, then we brought the attention of the government topmost people, and we were able to implement the treatment of the liquid waste, hospital waste, solid waste, segregation, slaughter waste, poultry waste, etc. All these things, have really earned a very good name to the Karnataka government. Karnataka government and even the WHO appreciated the efforts taken by the Karnataka government, and we were the first in the whole of the country to enforce the law of the biomedical waste. With the result, the spin-off benefits are plenty. Number 1, I will explain. The Victoria Hospital, the Bowring Hospital, and several government hospitals were spending 30 to 40 lakhs to purchase the water from BWSSB because their treated hospital is also a commercial venture. So with treatment plant and using the treated water for landscaping and various other toiletry and etc. Their water bill came down from 30 lakhs to 15 lakhs. So nearly 15 lakhs money they used to save, which they were unable to get that much of budget for medicine. So like that, several issues have been brought to the notice of the authorities concerned. So like that, the Lok Adalat has done a wonderful work where the WHO is recognized and deputed the number of other people from various other Asian countries, from the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Pakistan, to undergo training in Ramaya Medical College, because they were the people who first initiated that when I was the Environment Secretary. And like that, we started questioning the Pollution Control Board, giving clearances without properly enforcing it, and also Forest Department giving clearances for mining and various other industries. So about more than 300 Lok Adalat meetings we conducted with 5 sitting judges, one after another, where I served 10 long years, and the documents are available. We have done a really, Lok Adalat has done an excellent work. The records will speak how we were able to get the collective wisdom of the at a district level, and we were able to move many things which no other state have done. So I will once again thank you, the principal and his team, and the other great two people are talking today. I'm very keen to listen to them, this because they are all really people who are in the field, and so we can listen to them about their country, how they were able to address this global issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the keynote address. Now, I would request today's theme speaker, Jill Corford, co-convener of United Kingdom Environmental Law Association, Environmental Litigation Working Party, Associate Solicitor at DLM in Birmingham, UK, to address the webinar. Over to you, madam.
Good morning. Well, it's good afternoon to everyone over there. Good morning. It's morning time in the UK. But thank you all very much for having me or inviting me to speak to you all today. I hope you find my talk interesting. It's probably going to be a bit more on the technical side than your two previous speakers, and their talks I've found absolutely fascinating. Just a bit of background about environmental issues that the UK currently face, which is pretty much really the same as all nations throughout the world, with climate change, pollution, intensive farming and agriculture, which has resulted in environmental degradation, loss of habitat for species. I mean, the UK is one of the most nature deprived countries in the world, and I think that's mainly because we're a small island, high population, lots of development, intensive farming, and nature just tends to get squeezed out. So in terms of environmental protection for the UK, I mean, our figures for nature biodiversity loss continues to fall, so that sort of raises the question, is environmental protection working? You know, our legislation, is it working in the UK? Because it's not stopping the decline. I think it helps, but it's obviously not making too much of a difference. But we do have quite strict laws and regulations in place over here, which are overseen by regulators. Some of the issues around the regulators has been cuts to their funding and budgets, which I think is quite common. You know, the environment has not been seen as a high priority for UK governments when it comes to austerity, which we had recently, a few years ago. And so the first departments to get cut is normally the Environment and Natural England, which is responsible for managing our biodiversity. So mainly we suffer quite bad air pollution over here. We've got climate change to deal with, fisheries in decline. So we've had environmental laws in place now for many years in the UK. But environmental issues really only started to emerge as a potential area of concern in the 1990s. I mean, we were known at one time as the dirty man of Europe, which is something that I hope we never return to, but that was back in the 60s, 70s and 80s until environmental protection and the EU legislation that we had to impose as being a member of the EU started to have an impact and make us think about our waste and managing its disposal a bit more appropriately. So we have environmental, quite stringent environmental controls, and more recently we've had introductions, legislation, the Clean Air Act that's just currently being updated to deal with our problems with air pollution. There's been a lot of arguments from businesses over the years really that our environmental regulation has grown since the 90s, has become too burdensome for businesses. Our coalition government in 2010, as a result of lobbying from industries, started looking at deregulation of environmental protection and thinking, you know, businesses shouldn't have to, you know, have this burden of environmental legislation. I'm going to come back to the effects of regulation in a bit later in my speech. So our key environmental protection legislation for England, because we have devolution over here now, so Scotland, Wales, England and Northern Ireland, we tend to have our own separate legislation. But the key for environmental protection in England is the Environment Act, Environmental Protection Act, Water Resources Act and Environmental Permitting Regulations. And when I was the prosecutor at the Environment Agency, those are the main acts that we would prosecute businesses and individuals for breaches of that legislation. But having said that, there's a whole array, I mean, it's vast, just I suppose the same for you in India, of environmental protection law. Not all of it is used as much as it should be, and I think that goes back to the issue of what's been touched on today earlier on as lack of political will really to do this, which I think is short-sighted, but economic development takes priority over environmental protection. So our regulators that are responsible over here, we have the Environment Agency, which takes over regulation for environmental protection. We have Natural England, which deals with the biodiversity management of our sites of special scientific interest and our species, you know, our and flora and fauna. So they're really responsible for that. And then we have local authority that also deal with waste offences as well. We have individuals, NGOs who can bring cases against or claims against public bodies such as government and local authorities for either acting unlawfully or not in accordance with their powers. And this process is undertaken under our environmental judicial review system. So, and then we also have private nuisance law where individuals can take action against other individuals for causing environmental nuisance. So we do have good legislation there. I'm going to focus more on the Environment Agency's role in all of this because they're responsible for regulating major industry and waste, treatment of contaminated land, water quality and resources, our fisheries and inland river, estuary and harbour navigations, and to a certain extent conservation and ecology, but that is really more the role of Natural England. So our Environment Agency has a range of powers of investigation here, and so we can bring criminal investigations, and we can also issue civil sanctions against businesses that fail to comply with environmental protection. So how the Environment Agency works, it issues permits to companies that like chemical industries to control emissions to air, to land, environmental permits to waste management businesses so that they're managing their waste in accordance with the law and disposing of it, by taking it to landfill or to various waste management companies that have, again, permits to dispose of our waste in compliance with environmental legislation. The contaminated land regime is, when I was working at the Environment Agency, was mainly, well, we used to deal with historical contamination back in the 1950s when lorries could just take, from these really bad polluting industries, could just take all of their waste and they would drive them out into some beautiful spots in our countryside and just dump them. So in places like Herefordshire, which is essentially quite a rural county, there'd be a huge tip on the top of a hill, and all of these lorries would go in there unregulated and dump all of their waste. Well, the effect of that is, that quite often were on hills, is that you would have leach out of chemicals gradually going into drinking water. And then probably in the 1990s, when the EA came into existence, there was then this regime started to try and clean all of that up. We have contaminated land sites all over the country, a lot of them historic, some of them from industries that have carried out, illegal waste activities and started illegal waste sites. I mean, that happens a lot. So companies will set up an illegal waste site, unregulated, and then move off and do it somewhere else when there's a lot of public interest. And the EA do have problems then in bringing that back under control. So how we've dealt with contaminated land really is a lot through our planning system. We've put the onus more on developers who want to develop sites to clean up land, but we do still have a lot of issues with contaminated land affecting drinking water. It's an expensive process to clean up, and that, in my view, is why we should have better regulation of this, because not only does it affect drinking water, groundwater, but it also then goes up to air as well, so it's contributing to our air pollution. So in terms of prosecuting businesses, I think the Environment Agency is a fairly effective regulator, but has had to face a number of cuts to its budget, which has impacted on businesses that it regulates. So there's been a lax really in environmental protection, in my view, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years. We tend to keep an eye on what the Environment Agency is doing as part of our role of UKLA. Is the Environment Agency actually protecting our environment? And there has been a significant drop since we had austerity measures introduced and budget reductions in environmental prosecutions. And that hasn't been seen or balanced by them issuing civil sanctions to businesses instead. So that is a cause for concern for us. But if you spoke to somebody at the Environment Agency, they would say that they're still actively managing waste businesses and tackling illegal waste crime. But just by way of an example, in 2019, the Environment Agency prosecuted 77 companies. So that's not that much really in the overall scheme of things. It's quite a significant reduction. But when they do prosecute businesses, since the government introduced sentencing guidelines for environmental offences, which came out in 2014, there's been a significant increase in fines, whereas prior to the guidelines coming into force, as an example of Severn Trent Water, with a turnover of over £1 billion a year profit, would get a fine of £10,000 to £30,000 maximum, and that would be a good result. Now, water companies, under the sentencing guidelines, because of their high turnovers, are having fines imposed for up to £1 million. Thames Water in 2017 were fined £20 million for sewage water offences. So that has had a significant impact on water companies and utilities and how they're managing our sewage. because they had antiquated systems that they weren't updating. There was lots of problems going on at sites just through lack of investment, really, because the way our water utility companies are set up is that they have to make a profit and report to shareholders. I don't necessarily agree with the way that they do that, but these fines have really had a significant impact on water companies and made them much more focused on how they manage their sewage systems to avoid polluting and to avoid these high fines. So I'm just going to run through, really, because I think our sentencing guidelines have had quite an impact on environmental offences over here in terms of making businesses much more focused on their environmental responsibilities. So our guidelines provide a step-by-step guidance, which leads the court to a potential range of fines with a starting point. So what they have to take into account, well, first of all, they deal with core environmental offences of unauthorised deposit, treatment or disposal of waste, illegal discharges to air, land and water, and other analogous environmental offences. The court look at the turnover of the company, and they're put into categories: micro, small, medium, large, and then sort of extra large, and then there's a range of their turnover. So extra large companies would be like our water utilities with their significant turnovers of £1 billion per annum, and then the smaller micro companies would have an annual turnover of just under 100,000, or say 90,000. So it's quite a range there. And then they look at a number of factors such as environmental harm, and that's set out in categories of deliberate, reckless, negligent, low culpability, and then also the level of that's the harm, and then culpability factors as well. So the harm will really be, is it a major harm that's caused major environmental harm, significant, not so significant, and then minor? And the court put all these factors into their final sentencing, and then it gives them a range of fines to issue. So I think that's the end of my time here, but I'll just run on for a little bit longer. So Thames Water, which I've said before, they were ordered to pay 20 million fine in 2017. We've had Southern Water over £1 million fine, and then other companies as well, waste management companies, have also faced significant fines. The Court of Appeal have stated here that these fines don't just go to companies, that directors as well, as individuals, can also end up facing fines, and that they need to be looking, or the guidelines and the courts have stressed that the need for senior management now is to buy in on environmental matters. And the Court of Appeal stated that clear evidence from the chief executive or chairman of a main board that the main board is taking effective steps to secure substantial overall improvement in the fulfilment of its environmental duties will be a significant mitigating factor, with the aim being to drive top-down compliance and draw the impacts of poor environmental performance to the attention of senior management. So there has been an increased focus on risk of harm. We do have some issues with the sentencing guidelines, but on the whole, I think they've made a significant improvement and raised awareness of environmental harm. So what has been the impact of the EA? What are the Environment Agency on environmental pollution overall? Well, they will say that since 2008, the Environment Agency have cut emissions of sulphur oxides by 81%, nitrous by 65%, greenhouse gases by 47%, and PM particle matter 10, one of the most damaging particulates in air pollution, by 37%. So, and in terms of water, companies discharging ammonia into watercourses, that's dropped, they say, by over 15,000 tonnes a year to 3,000 discharges of phosphorus from over 20,000 tonnes a year to around 2,000. So they are having some impact, but whether that's enough, not really being seen on the ground. So I know at the moment in India there is some change coming to. I read that the government were introducing or relaxing environmental protection. So I think that comes to the issue really of regulation. Do we need environmental regulation? Well, clearly, I think it's essential for environmental protection. I think good regulation protects people and the environment from harm and creates a level playing field for businesses as well. I think businesses know where they are. In the UK, it's essential for us dealing with other companies that we have a good, that the company dealing with another company in another country has good environmental protection systems, environmental management systems. It can be a good seller for business. It needn't be bad for business. And it certainly shouldn't stop businesses from making money. It should enhance their ability, really. I think environmental protection shouldn't be put to one side because good regulation doesn't just protect the environment, it enhances it. And we have a moral duty as well. And industries should have a moral duty and welcome it as a way to help reduce the risks that their operations could otherwise pose to people or the environment, and particularly more so now when over in the UK here we have our Extinction Rebellion group, NGO raising awareness of what they say is a climate emergency, an environmental emergency. So businesses should play their role. And as your first speaker said, we should all learn really to live differently. And I think COVID-19 should help us from that. But responsibility onto industries, they should accept, and not just the government, that they should pay the cost of being regulated. And the underlying theme in UK law is that, and it's a principle throughout our environmental law, is that the polluter pays. And that is in UK legislation as well. So I think good regulation needs teeth because not everybody plays by the rules. So you need an active regulator with political will behind that regulator to ensure that we have good environmental protection. So I think I've now run out of time, so I'm just going to now end my talk, but I'm happy to take any questions afterwards if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for transmitting our mindset towards the theme of the webinar. Now I request today's one more distinguished theme speaker, Sikulilo Nkobo, Faculty of Law, University of Johannesburg, South Africa, to address the webinar. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Okay, I hope that everybody can see the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so my presentation is titled "The Role of the Role of Legislation in Environmental Protection: A South African Perspective." So I'm obviously going to be looking at the topic from a South African perspective. But before I actually get into South Africa in terms of our environmental protection laws, I'd like to just take a moment to look at it more from an international law perspective. So if you actually look at the current state of our planet as it actually stands right now, legislation is probably one of the most important instruments that governments are able to use when it comes to organizing society and protecting citizens. So the same is obviously true when it comes to the use of environmental laws in order to be able to protect the environment. And it goes without saying that environmental degradation is obviously a reality for us at a global level. And that is something which can be illustrated by some of the devastation that is currently happening in the world right now. If you look at what is happening on the coast of Mozambique, where you've got a recent oil spill that was caused by a Japanese ship a few days or rather weeks ago, and that has obviously caused a great deal of devastation for that particular country. So when we speak about devastation caused by environmental degradation, we don't even have to look back in terms of years or decades. If we literally just look back in terms of days and weeks, we can see just, the extent of the damage that the environment is obviously facing. So in addition to what is obviously happening in Mozambique, if we also look at the devastation that has been caused by hurricanes Laura and Marco in the Gulf of the Mexico, as well as the US as well. That in itself is also another indication of the fact that climate change obviously continues to have a devastating effect so far as the environment is concerned. And in addition to that, if you look at our current global pandemic, that obviously took us all by surprise, which is why we are all sitting in our homes staring into our screens, whereas ordinarily we would have hopped on a plane and gone to India in order to actually have this discussion live in person, but we obviously are not able to do so. And if you look at the global pandemic, it in itself illustrates just how human beings have obviously interfered with the environment. And COVID-19 is obviously then a direct consequence of humans and their interference with nature, as well as the ecosystem. So legislation, it goes without saying, obviously has a very important role to play when it comes to. Sorry, I just lost my images. My apologies. Okay, so as I was saying, legislation obviously has a very important role to play when it comes to the mitigation of environmental damage, as well as the reduction of pollution, and also in terms of the preservation of our natural resources. And at an international level, it's obviously very clear that states are now more than ever taking this responsibility very seriously. And this is evident from a report that was compiled by the United Nations Environmental Program in 2019, its first ever report on the global assessment of environmental rule of law. And that report specifically noted that 176 countries worldwide have put in place environmental framework laws, which are obviously essential when it comes to the slowing down and in certain cases, the reversing of environmental degradation. So it therefore goes without saying that more and more countries are obviously putting legislative measures in place in order to ensure that they prioritize environmental protection. And South Africa is obviously not an exception when it comes to providing for an environmental framework in order to be able to deal with environmental protection within this particular country. So if I perhaps might give you a bit of a historical overview so far as South Africa's environmental regulatory framework is concerned, South Africa was largely a mining intensive country for the longest time. And South Africa's mining industry dates back to the 1800s. And historically, the mining industry has made a significant amount of contributions to the country's economy. But in the same light, the mining industry has also made a significant amount of contribution when it comes to environmental degradation. And over the years, the mining has obviously declined. However, the damage which is caused to the environment remains. And prior to our current environmental legislative framework that we currently have now, our environmental laws did not do justice in order to actually deal with environmental protection. So what that then meant is that mining companies would come into the country, they'd obviously extract resources from the country, and then they would later close down and leave. And they would leave with, they'd obviously leave the country with a great deal of environmental degradation, and there were no legislative measures in place to actually hold them accountable. So as it stands, we're sitting with a great deal of environmental degradation. And that was obviously caused by the mining industry, but legally, they can't actually be held liable. So an example would actually be acid mine drainage. Acid mine drainage is a big problem in South Africa. And the environmental legal framework of the time did not make provision for the rehabilitation of the environment or for the remedying of the environmental degradation caused by the mining industry, which then means that that must now fall onto the state. The state must now bear the costs of remedying that pollution. And obviously, that is a massive problem because as a developing country, South Africa has other needs, such as the eradication of poverty, for instance, providing education as well as housing to its citizens. Now having to also, in addition to that burden, to also now have to deal with the cost of having to remedy environmental degradation that was caused by the mining industry is not the ideal. Whereas had we back then already put legislative measures in place to remedy and hold the polluters accountable, we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation that we are currently in right now. So what then happens is that we obviously then had need to reform our environmental management framework, and the current legislative framework in South Africa is primarily regulated by the National Environmental Management Act, which is probably the equivalent of India and the UK's Environmental Protection Act. And in addition to the Environmental Management Act, we also have sector-specific pieces of legislation that obviously work in conjunction with the Environmental Management Act. So perhaps if I may say that primarily at a foundational level, the purpose of our environmental management legislation is to give effect to our obligations at an international law level and to also give effect to the well-established principles of environmental law principles, as well as obviously also our own domestic policies when it comes to environmental management. And so it goes without saying that a country's laws are therefore an articulation of its values, and environmental protection is obviously a norm which needs to be given effect to. And so I'm therefore of the primary role that the South African legislation is essentially the role rather of South African legislation, the primary role, in my opinion, the most fundamental role that ought to be played by legislation within the context of environmental protection is to give effect to the principles of environmental management. And I just want to have to touch on those principles, even if it's quite briefly. And there are a number of well-established principles within the context of international law, so far as environmental protection is concerned. And I've just chosen some of the more pertinent ones. I know in some texts, the principles may be expressed differently, but ultimately, these are the principles which I'm obviously referring to. The good faith principle, as well as the law of treaties, the principle of state responsibilities, the principle of good neighbor lines, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, as well as the prevention of environmental harm, and the precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, as well as the principle of sustainable development. And obviously, in the interest of time, in as much as I would have really wanted to have a more thorough discussion so far as these principles are concerned, I would obviously not be able to do so. But if I just perhaps then look specifically at the National Environmental Management Act, NEMA, and the fact that the principles of environmental management as expressed within international law instruments are given effect to in Section 2 of NEMA. So Section 2 of NEMA specifically gives effect to the following principles, and that would be the principle of sustainable development, public participation and access to information, the precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, responsibility from cradle to grave, the public trust doctrine, the public interest principle, as well as the principle of integration, and lastly, the principle of social, economic, and environmental impacts. And so you'd obviously know that so far as the principles are concerned, the principles are very interrelated, and giving effect to one principle most likely is most likely dependent rather on another principle. So for the purposes of my discussion, I am going to specifically focus on these four principles. So I'm going to specifically focus first on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And I think that this principle is very instrumental so far as shaping South Africa's environmental laws. So at an international level, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities is a twofold principle. In the first instance, the principle recognizes that as states, our contribution to environmental degradation has not been equal. We have not contributed to the same extent so far as pollution and environmental degradation is concerned. And on the other hand, it also recognizes that in recognizing that our contribution is not equal, in the same manner, the resources that we have in order to deal with environmental degradation as well as other aspects of environmental protection are also not equal. And as such, we need to be able to adopt an approach that will obviously take this into account. And I think that this is very important because very often, or for far too long, environmental protection has been seen as something which is mostly afforded to states with bigger pockets and states that obviously have more resources, perhaps meaning that third world and developing countries don't necessarily need to prioritize environmental protection. I must, however, say that an approach of that nature is flawed, because when it comes to environmental protection, where there is a lack of prioritizing environmental protection, it is very unfortunate that it is the poorest of the poor who very often suffer the harsh consequences that come with a lack on the part of a state to ensure that environmental protection is obviously prioritized. I would then want to move on to the precautionary principle. That principle, obviously in its simplest form, requiring that a risk-averse approach be adopted when it comes to environmental management. And I can safely say that within the South African context, our current environmental management legislative framework gives does to a great extent give effect to the precautionary principle. And this is something which is illustrated, for instance, within our environmental impact assessment regime, where environmental authorizations are required prior to the commencement of certain activities, which obviously pose a serious threat to the environment. And I know that that wasn't necessarily always the position in the past in terms of the previous dispensation. And then within the context of water resources as well, water use licenses are required for activities which pose a threat to water resources. And in addition to that, the conducting of a climate change impact assessment is also required within the context of certain activities. And there's a case that actually came before our courts in 2017, where the High Court actually ruled or rather the High Court actually ruled in favor of environmental lobby groups who were against the authorization or approval rather of the construction of a power station on the basis that the applicant for the power station had failed to conduct a climate change impact assessment, obviously ruling in favor of promoting environmental protection. So that is just an indication of the fact that to a certain degree, the laws are obviously working in that regard. However, in as much as I can safely say that South Africa's environmental laws do give effect to the precautionary principle, it is very unfortunate that in certain instances, the laws themselves tend to contradict themselves when it comes to promoting the precautionary principle. For instance, in Section 24G of NEMA, provision is made for environmental authorization to be applied for after the commencement of an activity which commenced without the requisite environmental authorization, despite the fact that the very same act specifically requires that those specific activities may not commence without without the necessary environmental authorization. And then in a latter part of the very same act, there's now provision for activities to comments, and then the parties will obviously be condoned, or the parties will be allowed to later then apply for the necessary environmental authorization. This is obviously a very unfortunate situation. It's situations like these whereby it's a matter of allowing for activities to take place, and then the control will then come afterwards. So that's one of the unfortunate parts. In the interest of time, if I move on to the polluter pays principle, again, as I've said, that with the previous dispensation, the polluter principle was obviously not given effect to, which is why the state was then left with the burden of having to remedy environmental degradation caused by the mining sector. However, as it stands now, the position is completely different, and within the context of mining, for instance, provision is obviously made for rehabilitation to be done by the mining companies once they cease their operations within the specific activities that they were dealing in. And in addition to that, there are also fines in place in order to fine those that obviously cause damage to the environment. And the system is similar to that of the UK that was that Jill spoke to earlier on, where we have a turnover-based system. So the deeper your pockets, the more you actually have to pay for the costs of remedying the effects of environmental degradation that have obviously been caused by your activities. And so I think this is obviously a very progressive move. The fact that we do have mechanisms in place to actually hold polluters accountable. And then lastly, I want to look at the principle of sustainable development, which is obviously very important within the context of a developing country, given the competing interests that developing countries obviously need to deal with. And within the context of sustainable development, I think that from a policy and from a legislative perspective, our environmental laws do attempt to balance environmental as well as social and economic issues. But given the fact that we are obviously a developing country, you find more often than not that social and economic issues tend to be prioritized over environmental ones. And this is also evident when it comes to the jurisprudence and the litigation. Very often in the past, you'd find that the courts are obviously willing to allow and approve authorizations when it comes to activities that are going to benefit the economy, obviously then at the expense of environmental protection. But that being said, I think from a South African perspective, we certainly do have a decent legislative framework in place, and our environmental laws do give effect to the principles of environmental management, the internationally recognized principles, that is. So from on paper, the laws are there and they certainly look good. However, the biggest concern is compliance as well as enforcement. When it comes to compliance and enforcement, I can't necessarily speak with the same degree of confidence. And I see that my time has run up. So unfortunately, that is where I'm going to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam, for transmitting our mindset towards the theme of the webinar. Now, the floor is open for the interaction. As we are running out of time, we take up only few questions which we have received from chat box. I request Sunil Kumar sir to moderate the interaction session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. The first question from the audience side to Elaparedi, sir. Sir, the question is, the joining of rivers in India benefits or affect the environmental protection? Sir, I request you to unmute the mic.
Hello.
Sir, yes, sir.
So the problem is, already we have built several dams, right from the first plant till today. The effect of it is, most of the dams are silted up, and the downstream people are paying a very big price of the floods. Connecting rivers, preventing their natural flow. And whenever you connect it, you have to build dams at a very massive geological changes of submersion, rehabilitation, destruction of the forest. Already we have lost more than 70 to 80% of the virgin forest right from Britishers' time. So leftovers are few patches, and if you indulge in that thing, very eminent people also question. Mr. J.D. Agarwal really took a fast for 100 days and died, not to destroy Ganga River by constructing dams. So we know what is happening at the global level. In Switzerland, they are removing the dams and demolishing the dams which they constructed and allowing the natural flow to continue. So that such being the case, all India has already suffered enough, including Karnataka. I think this is not possible and it should not be allowed.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the one more question to you. How to strengthen the Indian law for environmental protection?
See, the problem is now the people should question the polluters. As Mr. Krishna to UK speaker to the Johannesburg speaker has clearly emphasized who's dominating. It is the corporate bodies are dictating the terms and the policies. Namesake, the environmental law is there. We have plethora of laws where enforcement is the thing which is really causing concern. If you wanted to know about the Bangalore Bellandur Lake and also Rishivavati Lake, there are laws. Why we fail to implement the law? 80% of the sewage water is untreated. 90% of the industrial waste, industrial effluents are untreated. All our lakes are contaminated. All our rivers are contaminated. The water is not fit for human consumption. But law is there. But we know the real culprits, the predators, and who are responsible for that. So the people should question whether you want the polluting industries or public health or common man, and the children, the future citizens, the citizens of our country, the young children are really are the soft targets of such negligence of everybody in our country. So we have got law, but enforcement is so weak. Even when we approach the courts, courts also will take slightly different views. If you are lucky, the decision may come in favor of punishing a polluters. So there are several cases starting from Bhopal tragedy till today. Lakhs of people suffered, died. And that man who killed Bhopal, killed people, and endosulfan is killing people, they are really scot-free. And he walked out. This chief executive of the Bhopal tragedy have been given a Padma Bhushan for killing lakhs of people. So that is our country law. How to strengthen? Law is there. But they escape, they don't pay. There are so many lacunas in the law. So the Pollution Control Board puts the blame on BWSS, BW puts and BBFP, like that. So Bangaloreans are suffering from Bellandur, Rishbhavati Valley, pollution, and water is getting from various places. And how long we can survive, God alone knows. Because silence of conspiracy by the elites and super elites and middle class people. So people alone can question the decision makers and prevent such disasters after disasters. Whole of Karnataka is suffering from the floods because all our dams, because I know my 60 years experience, the Harangi, Himavati, Kabini, 40% is silted up. Tungabhadra is completely silted up. And still we wanted to connect rivers and we wanted to strengthen the law. So all the mining authorities, no punishment. They are continuing to do the mining and silting is taking place. Law is there. So people should question the decision makers. In one case, I will quote if you have time. So one of the mining contractor encroached forest land, destroyed the forest. And then I was in that committee. They have recovered 14 crores fine, regularized encroachments to the same fellow and given 30 years lease. So MOF says that it is as per the law. And recently, after in the month of June, when one of the elephant habitats, one of the mining company have given permission for coal mines in elephant habitat. So the expert committee says that because they already destroyed, so we'll let us regularize and grant another 500 acres in an elephant habitat. That is the law. What is the use of such laws? And present draft law, as Professor Krishna has said, that they are empowering the people. Johnsburg speaker has said that first you go ahead with the industry, then we will consider to find out the impact on an environment. There are laws, but implementation is absolutely weak. Nothing. That is because we, the voters, are not concerned about the Mother Earth. So the people are taking advantage. So common man, high class people, not concerned. So we are happy. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The next question to Jill Crawford, ma'am. Ma'am, the question to you is, what are the major limitations to successful implementation of our environmental legislation? Ma'am, I'm repeating the question.
Repeat the question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. What are the major limitations to successful implementation of our environmental legislation? Ma'am, I request you to unmute the mic.
I would have to say that I think that's down to lack of political will and resources. And that comes a lot from lobbying from industries as well. I mean, we do have businesses that want other businesses to be compliant, but we also have other sectors of industry that say that the burden is too great. And so there has been, and I think probably over the last 10 years, this gradual sort of decline in the focus of regulation on bigger businesses and the smaller ones, and the smaller ones can be just as polluting and cause as much harm as the bigger ones. But the EA's focus, as it's lost its resources, has been to tackle more of the illegal waste activities and the criminals that make a lot of money from it, which some may say is a good thing, but it tends to ignore what's going on. I think you have to look at it as a big picture and include everybody in that, or all the businesses that are causing a pollution. But due to lack of resources, the focus has been more on the big, bad and nasty, as they call them, rather than, the smaller ones. Because when I was at the EA prosecuting, we would do the whole range, but there's been significant cuts in funding. So I think it's going back to the answer. It's lack of political will, lack of resources, and the resources comes from political will due to pressure from industry. Does that answer your question?
Excellent. She answered very beautifully. It is the political will.
Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Very good reply.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. And the last question to Sikula Nikoba, ma'am. Ma'am, the question to you is, does intra-industry trade damage our ecosystem with a break in food chain? Do we need a legislation to regulate this new trade for environmental remediation?
Question.
Could you please just repeat the question?
Yes, ma'am. Does intra-industry trade damage our ecosystem with a break in food chain? Do we need a legislation to regulate this?
Thank you very much for the question. From my perspective, I would like to think that as it stands, the current legislative frameworks that states have in their individual capacities tend to be quite sufficient. I obviously can't necessarily speak for each and every single state per se, but I do know for a fact that we do have some very good environmental laws in place. And when it comes to inter-industry trade and whether that causes environmental degradation, it obviously depends on the type of activity that you are dealing with, but ultimately it does actually cause damage to the environment. And so to then answer the question, I don't necessarily think that it's a matter of having new laws to actually regulate that specific parts, but to rather make use of existing laws in order to ensure that they are obviously adequately complied with, and to further ensure that enforcement is not lacking. Because as Dr. Reddy said earlier on, the biggest problem is implementation so far as the laws are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. This is from the interaction session. Over to Vinay, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ellappa Reddy, sir, Jill Crawford, ma'am, and Sikula Nkoba, ma'am, for answering the questions of the participants. A small announcement before presidential remarks. We send the feedback form link now in the chat box as well as to the registered mail, which will be active for next 48 hours. Kindly fill the same and send back for e-certificate. The e-certificates will reach you from 7 to 10 days. Very shortly, we will meet in one more international webinar over our evening college, that is on 3rd September 2020, coming Thursday. The topic is Speaking of Gandhi, Relevance of Gandhian Philosophy at Present Context, in association with Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Foundation, Washington, USA. The invitation to register to this webinar will be sent to your mail ID. May I now request Sri Krishnaswamy sir, renowned advocate before the High Court of Karnataka, India, and honorary trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, to render presidential remarks. Over to you, sir.
Very well. Good evening, all the audience, participants. First of all, I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. N. Elaparedi, our secretary, who delivered his inaugural address, and the key speakers, Ms. Jill Crawford and Chikule Nkobo. It's a good seminar, especially the environmental laws. In Karnataka, in India, everywhere in the world, there are laws to control, to implement the ecological balance in the country, wherever it is possible, especially water, air, and ecology that is required for a human being to live a peaceful life throughout their life. So laws are there everywhere, but the implementing agency should be strong. Unless they implement it regularly and in equity, everybody should follow it. As our secretary already told, see, the love should be there. Everybody should love the ecology. His country is so, and our one of the speakers, Sikolin Kobo, told socio-economic position of the people is also a cause to the environment. So one should bear in mind the ecology or the environment is our right to maintain, to preserve, to give it to the next generation. The water, whatever Dr. Elaparedi told. So water is important, air is also important. There is pollution control board in our state, in the country, everywhere. So wherever a polluter is there, he has to pay for it. So that should be made very strong to pay. He has to pay for it if he pollutes. Like that, if the law is implemented, see that there should be some sort of thing that people will like. So people should be well taught to regulate themselves, as our lakes are polluted everywhere in Bangalore especially. So there are so many lakes which have been polluted. Like that, everywhere in India, not only in India, everywhere in the world, it is one pollution is there. So therefore, my endeavor is to all the participants to see that law is there, the implementing agency should be strong, and we should help them to implement, and that's the. So I thank everyone and all in who participated here, and it's a good theme. International webinar is a good one, and I thank each and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words. Now I request Ranga N, Assistant Professor, Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, to render vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
It's a me, Rangan. It is my proud privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College on this occasion. At the outset, I thank United Kingdom Environmental Law Association, Birmingham, United Kingdom, and University of Johannesburg, South Africa for cooperation to conduct this international webinar. I thank the Vice Chancellor and Office Bearers of University of Johannesburg, and I thank Christy Sneeberger and Chair Ukela and Alison Boyle, Operation Director Ukela. I thank Dr. Udupi Krishna Sir, President, Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi, and Honorary General Secretary, Seshadripuram Educational Trust for the inaugural address. Thank you, sir. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to today's chief guest who has rendered the keynote address, Dr. Ain Elapareddy, renowned environmentalist, India. Thank you very much, sir, for making this international webinar a grand success. I am humbled and grateful to you, sir. I would like to express our sincere thanks to Jill Crawford, co-convener of UK ELA's Environmental Litigation Working Party, Associate Solicitor at BLM in Birmingham, United Kingdom, for giving an excellent coverage on the theme. Thank you, madam. I would like to thank Ms. Sikulai Nikoba, the Faculty of Law, University of Johannesburg, South Africa, for rendering the speech on this occasion. Thank you, madam. I express a wholehearted thanks to Sri Krishnaswamy K, renowned advocate before the High Court of Karnataka and Honorary Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, Bengaluru, India. We are grateful to your support for all our programs. Thank you, sir, for your presidential remarks. In his absentia, I thank Professor C.L. Baswarajaya, sir, Chairman, Governing Council, SCDC, and I thank all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. My special thanks to our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, sir, who is the strength of our Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. I would like to thank all the office bearers, United Kingdom, Environmental Law Association, Birmingham, United Kingdom, and University of Johannesburg, South Africa. I would like to thank Darappa Konnur, Head, Department of English, and Convener, Nisarga Mitra, Sunil Kumar Ji, Coordinator, IQAC, who have helped us to materialize this webinar. I express our gratitude to all the principals, conveners, and members of all our sister institutions and other colleges, academicians, research scholars, students, and delegates across the globe for participating in this webinar. We will ever remain grateful to our teaching and administrative staff for their support. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Elapareddy, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jill, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sikila, madam.
Thank you, Ranga sir. Once again, thank you one and all. Now we conclude the webinar. Sunil Kumar sir, kindly end the session.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We are concluding the webinar.